And start. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Take two. Okay, so just a couple of minutes. I just need a couple of minutes to kind of talk about what we want to do moving forward through the spring-summer season. We talked about, when I say we, Justin and Alex and I and Mike, kind of how we want to do the protocol for sales meeting. We're thinking maybe things get a little bit busier in the summer, and we may not want to do an actual formal training class every single week. And so the idea came up that maybe what we could do is do it like every other week, and then have like what we used to have back in the old days. Melissa, maybe you remember this. We used to have what we call a huddle. And what would be is more for agents to come in. I've got a problem. I've got a question. What's everybody else doing? Connect and the communication between agents. One of us, when I say one of us, it would be probably Justin, Alex, or myself will be here so that we can answer questions for you. And then so it's a come in and kind of socialize a little bit if you feel like you need to do that, or meet someone to kind of go over some stuff, or we'll just have it as an open, we call it huddle just because we're going to talk, and that's all. No planned agenda other than just to be able to chat. So if you're comfortable with that, we'd like to maybe start instituting that, maybe even starting next week. And then, like I said, we'll have a formal training or something like we're doing. Like if it's a business meeting, we'll do that every other week. Does everybody have any opinions on that? Suggestions? I'll tell you what, I'll let you think about it, give you the meeting, and then when we're done, we'll go to a vote. Is that okay? Kind of nod your head yes or go if it's a bad idea. Also, today we've asked Robyn to come in because she's doing some things that we probably need to just kind of refresh your memory on correct protocol for. And so with no further ado, you ready? Here's Robyn.
Hey, hi everyone. So this is not only my hot list. This actually is Cindy as well. If I mention something and you go, oh, she's talking about me, well, chances are it's you and somebody else.
And somebody else and somebody else.
And somebody else is already, because we're not just doing the one-off issues that we're seeing. This is repeated items that are coming up. So we'll just hop on in. First of all, earnest monies. We have talked about earnest money release because we are still seeing failed transactions. Dang it. So if those come in, we still have a 10 business day before we can release them, unless they were drawn on our bank. Then it's a little faster, but just tell everybody you can't go under contract, deposit earnest money and expect it back 2 days later. It won't happen.
Can I throw in something on earnest money while we're talking? You okay for interruptions?
Yeah.
Okay. So also, as far as the state of Utah is concerned, earnest money, buyer agent and seller agent have to know immediate status of where that earnest money is and where it is, if it's in or not. We had a situation not too long ago where we had money that the buyer had tried to get money for one reason or another, was having some struggles getting it taken care of. And it was our it was our buyer. The listing agent didn't know about it. And so as listing agent, we need to make sure when an offer is written, we confirm where the earnest money is. If that money is deposited within 48 hours, 72 hours, whatever, after going under contract, we need to have dialogue with the buyer's agent. Where's the money? Show me the money. And it's got to be documented. Well, I just had one online that I did that the agent actually deposited with the title company and never made a notice of that in our contract negotiation. And so we had to do an addendum to identify this is where the money is being held. So just be really, really careful on either side of the transaction. You always have to know the status of the earnest money. If you're the buyer's agent and for some reason the buyer gets it, but that there was a problem with communication or something like that and it didn't come in, your job is immediately to notify the listing agent that money's not been collected yet. Here's what we're doing. Are you okay? Most cases, agents go, I'll talk to my seller. I'm sure we'll be fine, because most often it's just a little glitch. But if there is a problem, we want to know about it. If we don't communicate as the buyer's agent to the listing agent that money has not been received, beyond that deadline, if it cancels, we are responsible for the money. We have to come out of our pocket to pay it. So it's very important to be on top of where the earnest money is in the status. Keep it documented, okay? Question.
As a listing agent, if your buyer deposits a title company, what do you do? What's the seller's
You just, as part of the contract, the buyer's agent should be documenting in one of the addendums, earnest money will be held. There actually is a title company,
Well,
earnest
yeah,
money.
before, yeah,
or
and the
trust.
and the seller agrees to it with the offer. But what if the seller doesn't like that?
Then that offer can be voided.
Hence
It's
the
voidable.
reason, there is an addendum where you can identify where the earnest money is going to, that it is going to be deposited with the title company and which title company.
Yeah,
And so the seller in negotiating goes, I'm not satisfied with that.
Yeah, okay.
They have the right to go, I don't want that earnest money there. I don't like that title company. I've had a bad experience with them. You as this listing, excuse me, as a listing agent representing the seller, have the right and ability to go ahead and question.
yeah,
Why
I'm
are
saying,
some, oh, sorry. go.
I'm saying like if you already agreed, you've already accepted the offer, right? And
Okay.
in the standard Prepsi, it's deposited at the buyer's brokerage.
But identify, buyer's brokerage, okay.
Yeah, and then they deposit it at the title company. Okay,
Yeah, there's a problem.
So that contract is voidable.
Voidable.
okay.
So question, just for my learning, what is the most common between listing and buying? Who controls where the earnest money goes? What's most common? Does the buyer, when they write that offer, you have more control over where it goes, or does the seller have more control?
Well, some real estate offices don't even do trust accounts anymore because they don't want to have the hassle of having to account for them. And so everything they have goes to their quote unquote title company. It's a good question. I'm not sure exactly percentage wise how many are actually being held by title. Maybe Robyn can answer that.
Okay.
Well, no, not even held by title company, but when you guys negotiate, how much power does the seller say, well, no, I'm gonna dictate where the earnest money goes versus the buyer say, I'm gonna dictate where it goes?
Seller controls the asset, and that's something the buyer wants. So the seller has quite a bit of discretion on insisting what they want done.
Okay, that's what I thought, because that's, okay, but
I
I
mean,
didn't
when
know
multiple
what was
offer, the
on.
seller can pretty much get whatever they want.
yeah, that's true.
And another thing, if you actually have a client, if you're representing the buyer and a situation comes up where you're talking nowadays, $10,000-$20,000 earnest money, don't put it with the title company because you know how hard that's going to be to get out if there's
I do know
fall
how
through.
hard.
Why
It
do
requires
people
attorneys.
prefer the title company
Yeah.
over the brokerage?
Just because they don't have to have the hassle of having the money deposited and everything. It's just it's convenience.
It's just whether the brokerage carries an account or not.
Yeah, not all.
Not everyone does.
Mhm.
Really?
Well,
Well, they're
I'll
supposed to
go
by
back.
law. Go ahead.
by law, you do have to have a trust account, but you don't always have to,
But by policy, you don't have to use it.
you're right. So a lot of brokerages are, I don't know who to look at here or the people in the room.
Just look at the people.
So they just are saying, oh, deposit it with the title company because they just don't want the hassle. We, in our office, prefer that your earnest money for your buyers come here because there's a greater control that we have.
Same with our
And so
sellers,
it's,
too.
actually,
Okay.
I would say it's better for us to hold it on behalf of your buyers because, so you're representing them better. Otherwise, their money can really get tied up at a title company. So,
Yeah.
You can use me as an example. We had that happen, ended up having to get an attorney,
yeah,
and it took a couple months. We'd already sold the property, closed it, done, and
And at
still-
what cost your seller?
what's that?
And at what cost your seller?
$1,700.
There you go.
so, Yeah.
If you have a buyer that doesn't have a whole lot of like cash on hand, then they could get tied up and they wouldn't be able to purchase another home until they got that money.
Yeah.
Bingo.
bingo,
So
yeah,
I
they
learned it
could,
the hard way, but
so,
Okay.
Can you
Pardon?
repeat the bingo? I didn't hear the bingo. What
Well, you-
Randy just said, you said
Oh.
bingo.
I said that in
Oh.
the event that your buyer deposits the money at a title company and that's the only cash on hand they have, they can't go after a new home until they get that cash back.
Right.
Yeah.
And I always use an example. We actually had a commercial deal where we had $30,000 earnest money that was held at a title company and they never released it. That was too much. So we went 2 years in a lawsuit to get that back for our client. We were representing the buyer.
right, and Vanguard is holding earnest money on a deal from like 15 years ago that they absolutely refuse to release, that buyer and seller
Still can't agree.
still can't agree on. So it's not a joke. Anyway, so
Okay.
that's earnest money horror stories. But
Be afraid.
Also, we, accept wires, that's great. And if you are having a wire come in, or if your client's sending it, just let us know. And then we can be looking for it, because it sits there in banking land. It identifies the amount, but it doesn't say who it belongs to. So if you're crunching a deadline for receiving that, if we see that it's in there, we can post a receipt and then solidify it when the money actually clears, which is always at 11:59 p.m. the date that it shows up. But I'm not here at that time. So anyway, you just don't want to lose a deal because it's not been, so just communicate, that's all. We're getting a lot better about, because we're holding a lot of earnest money. Right now, we're getting so much better at title companies or the agents notifying us that we have extra funds that have to be released to title. Every title company that I know has been super gracious about sending a runner to pick it up. But that does have to be done the day in advance of closing, because otherwise they haven't held the funds and they can't close it. So just if you know you've got more money than what your commission is going to be, just kind of trigger that in your brain so we can get those released. We've got our little box out front. People are using it. That's great. Again, it's a communication thing. If they're dropping it there, just let us know so we can grab it. And that brings us to the next thing, which would be closing attendance. This is kind of a two-part thing. Agents are, go broker.
Okay, so as the buyer's agent representing your client, you have to have a hand on what's happening at closing, whether you're buyer or seller. And to do that more often than what we would like to see happen, almost in, that's the protocol, would be to attend closing with your client and go through that with advanced communication with the title company, so you know what's on the closing papers. You've actually seen them already and approved them for closure. If for some reason you can't be there, then what you need to do is, again, get with title company, make sure you reviewed all the documentation, that you're not all the documentation, like if it's buyer loan package, but at least the HUD settlement statement. We call them HUDs, but they're basically the CODs, what are they called?
Closing disclosure.
Closing disclosure. So the important part is that make sure that everything is correct, because the last thing you want to do is not be there and then you find out that there was a problem, an error, something was charged incorrectly, and that happens. I mean, title companies make mistakes. You are liable. The state of Utah recognizes the agent and the brokerage to be responsible for their client for their closing docs and stuff. And so if you don't review and something goes wrong and that becomes a litigation situation, they can actually file a complaint against you with the Division of Real Estate, and you will be punished. So it is mandatory that you do review all closing docs. If you can be there, that's even better. It's a good chance to have relationship with your client, kind of have closure, if you will. It's that love, huggy, kissy kind of thing.
And that's why they call it closing.
But yeah, but you need to make sure you're reviewing your docs in advance of actually the closing. And title company will typically get that for you 24 hours in advance. So just review it. Plus
Also
it.
helps.
I always send a copy to my client. Here's what you're going to be signing tomorrow. Review it. And we've actually had a couple of things come out with the guy was an investor, bought quite a few properties, and he went, there's a mistake here and here and here. And I didn't even notice that he did. So it's really a good idea to have your clients review CUDs before they even go to closing.
Because recently I had a title company and I didn't even send it and they just hand it to me at closing.
Yeah,
I did both sides with them. And I was like, "God."
yeah,
And a
exactly.
mistake happened and we had an addendum that wasn't even. Worked on the first agent too, but yeah, it slipped through Cindy and I's fingers and we had to fix it that day.
So I don't know if everybody heard that, but Kelsey had some issues with, they didn't actually give her copies
I'm
of
a
the document.
terrible agent. That's what I'm kidding.
She didn't get a copy of the settlement statement until she showed up, and she represented buyer and seller, and there were problems on it that had to get resolved.
I represented the buyer and seller on different, like not both of them, but
Oh.
he did that
Separate
both
side.
times.
Both times.
Yeah.
So get ahead of them 48 hours before and say, can I get HUDs tomorrow? And then make sure that they're ready. And normally they will be ready if good title company does. Just make sure you have a chance to look at them. Okay.
Bye.
Fire. And that would be also because it's state policy, it's office policy, but we are seeing things come through. We do have horror stories. Tammy had one that it was, the commission was so wrong, and it was a large transaction. And so anyway, there are mistakes that happen, and it's so much easier to catch it on the front end than on the back. Damage control is horrible. But then also that brings about the second point, which is if you are making changes to either your ERS or your buyer agency, please put those in escrow instructions. So it's documented, get it to the title company. That way they have a record. It is in writing. The lender will prefer seeing it. I mean, yes, if it involves a loan, make sure that those concessions are allowable. But when we get something and it's different than what our initial paperwork shows, we try very hard to flip your commissions and get them out the same day we get them in. But if we're tracking down inconsistencies, it just bogs down the process. And, you know, the title companies are like, oh, we didn't know. And I'm like, yeah, you should have known. Sometimes they do know, they should have known. And then you can judge whether or not that's a title company that you want to continue to do business with. Anyway, so there's that. That's actually one of the bigger ones, is getting everything on escrow instructions.
Can we also throw in there? Hi again. Okay, so it's important, like I said, if you are representing a client that maybe is low down payment, like a FHA loan or something, everything you do as far as agent concession back to your client has to be approved by the lender in writing. FHA has a $200,000 penalty if you commit fraud, and committing fraud by you didn't disclose that you paid 2 points of you paid part of their closing cost form. Because it's basically considered a gift by FHA that you give back to your lender, which decreases their percentage of actual down payment. They look at that as concession for down payment. And so now if it's less than 3%, then they have a problem and they will prosecute. There have been several cases in Utah where somebody's hit the $200,000 mark. So,
Well, I just had that recent one, remember, with the
Oh, yeah.
FHA duplex, and the homie lender, my clients, was on board, and the homie agent of the listing agent was on board with committing fraud. We were
wow,
the only ones that were like, no.
yeah, crazy.
So
Okay,
what you're saying, like if you said, well, I'll reduce my commission, or you do the commission concession at the end, that has to be
approved by the lender.
by the lender. Okay.
If it's a cash deal, it's no big deal.
Right.
If it's 30% down, it's probably no
Or
big
if
deal.
you're not giving them anything back,
And-
if you're just taking your straight commission.
And in writing, I've seen lenders that have actually wanted to commit fraud. It's no big deal. Just go ahead and do it and we'll be
Just
fine.
leave me off the email.
Yeah, exactly. So if you do have a question, you're a little uncomfortable, get back with the lender just to make sure we're on the same page. This is an email in writing. This is what we're going to do. Would you please confirm? And then if they're brave enough to confirm, then it's probably okay. If they call you back and said, well, then you know you got a problem. Okay.
Okay, let's see. Listings. Everybody loves it when we get listings. Yeah, they're rare, but if you are taking a listing, it's the office policy that we forward. I mean, most of the time calls are coming directly to you, but if they come to the office, we forward everything and ask questions about, well, who's on the sign, you know, where the location. If the listing has been turned in, then those questions trigger a lot easier than, and if by chance we're not right in front of a computer, it makes it hard to get those calls to you, to track down that listing. So please, if you're taking a listing and as soon as it hits the MLS, get that paperwork turned in through Dot Loop. And that way we have a record of it as an office. I know there's a lot of moving parts on a listing, so that little submit button could get overlooked. If you're taking a listing that's not going to be hitting the market, it's you're working with someone and you're securing the listing through an ERS, or you're doing all of the prep work, please fill out the waiver so that it covers your timelines there, and get that submitted into WFR, because clear cooperation is a thing and those fines do exist. You get kind of a slap on the hand on the first one.
MLS.
Exclusion form, yeah, the MLS exclusion form. So that's still a thing.
So you're just talking mainly if you're not gonna get it submitted in the time
If you're-
frame it's supposed to. Okay.
Right,
But
yeah,
if you're just gonna go through the process, get it submitted right on time, then you don't worry about
right,
it. Okay.
yeah. So if there's any delay, get the exclusion signed also. And let's see. So also, turning in things. Yes. New construction. If you're working new construction, and of course the builders have their own forms and things, even though it's new construction and you may not be generating those forms, please set up those loops and get them submitted. All real estate activities that you're doing, even if they fail, need to be in the brokerage database and controlled. So make those loops, throw the things in there. I mean, yeah, it's going to be 8 months before longer before it closes. But if we have it in our records, then it speeds things up on the back end. Yeah.
Question for you, because I have one right now in Little Bits of DR Horton Town Hall. Of course, they do all the paperwork on their end. They don't let us, but I submitted that. That's in .loop. They had a closing date of October. They now said it's going to be the end of August because they're pushing hard to meet their fiscal year and September 1st. You want me to go in and change from October to August, or do you want me to wait until they for sure know that? Because that's just something the agent just told me, said, we're pushing hard to beat our fiscal year, so we're pushing everything for August.
As
now.
long as it's communicated, your only real issue is if it's delayed, if it closes early, because the contract reads on or before.
Okay,
So if it closes a week or a month early, everybody's agreed to it, you're fine.
yeah. I
A
just
month
didn't know if you guys
late,
wanted
you've got to have
okay.
an agreement between buyer and seller that it is delayed.
But any of those change order forms, any of the tear sheets also need to be part of that new construction documentation that's in there. And with that, they may have their own wire fraud and buyer due diligence. As an office, we want your buyer agency, the wire fraud that's available through MLS, and the buyer due diligence. So not their forms, but ours. So those all need to be part of the loop as well. And so just, yeah, any additional documentation, just make sure. The biggest thing that's coming up on new construction is we don't have those loops submitted. Also that there's some verbiage in there that as to what the commission is, what it's based on. So make sure when you fill out your transaction sheet that you correctly reflect, like if it's on a base price and doesn't cover the upgrades, then great.
Or the land
Make
cost.
sure, or the lot is excluded, that it's not the full purchase price, that you define. That way we can.
So my client just added the fence and the blinds. So as soon as I get that back from DR Horton, that's what you're saying.
So
update
the
that.
change order in there, they
Okay.
probably won't pay you the commission on those
Oh, it's
upgrades.
fine. It's
but
only like
that's-
$4,000.
Yeah, but it's still documentation that
Okay.
pertains
It
to
doesn't
the.
hurt to ask.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
follow up and make sure I get that back because he said he was putting it
Yeah.
in. And get it.
And just if there's ever any questions, just reach out. I mean, I know the team members are reaching out amongst themselves, but if, you know, if there's ever a question like, oh, or somebody's not available, or if, anyway, just ask us. That's why we're here, is to answer questions.
Yeah,
A
you guys
couple,
have been very helpful.
a couple of people have come in actually, and we've gone through CMAs and done some additional training, and that's great. Happy to do it. And it helps. Melissa had one, and I think when Randy and I were doing the training together and we were talking about adjustments, he said, you know, hopefully you could get with a builder and see what they're charging. I probably just brushed over this when I was doing the one alone, talked about getting a lender's most current appraisal. They can redact that and pass them out to you, so you can see what the current adjustments are. Because Melissa, I hope it's okay if I use you, but we were working on one the other day and had thrown some figures in there, and they were low. Where if we would have had a copy of an appraisal that was in that area, we probably would have adjusted a little more. Her value came in low. She didn't lose the listing because of it, you know, but you know, and it is, the buyer has certain expectations, but it's so good if you can quantify your reasoning, you know.
The
And-
best thing you do is if you can bracket your subject, if you can have one that's a little higher and just like a square footage, one less than square footage or whatever, just enough difference that as you make your adjustment, you can play with those adjustments also, you get this equilibrium and you can kind of figure them out if you don't have access to that other stuff. Bracketing is probably the most important.
Choosing your comps is the best.
Yeah.
And what is it appraisal, I don't know what the word is, but you cannot make adjustments more than 20%.
Yeah, it's, I have to remember what it is. Because there's net adjustment and gross adjustment that have to be within 10 and 20, I believe.
Yeah, so
Or
if
you
you're,
have to really explain why.
yeah, if you're making adjustments beyond 20%, that's too much. Choose different comps,
Yeah.
or have a really good reason.
The only case that'd be okay is, for example, if the only comparable you had that really matched up with the property because it was unique property, and one comparable was on 2 acres and that one was on a half acre, and you had to make a huge adjustment for land, it'll throw you outside that percentage. But if you can really be sure of the difference in value on land, then that's okay. You just have to explain it, at least from an appraisal standpoint.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Pick your brain here.
Not much
I
left.
I think that's, we will be sending a little email about some of these things that we've touched on, just so you've got it in writing. But I mean, generally, things are going quite smoothly, except for failings. I mean, not the offers failing, or
Not the agents, the
not
offers.
your failings, just buyers failing. And so, yeah, I
Good,
think we're
awesome.
good.
Can I ask a specific question on one I have in there? I mean, maybe someone else has. So we put an offer in for 2.3 million. They came back at 2.7. Neither side's willing to budge, but this property's sitting on the market longer and longer, and the agent said, well, they may be willing to come down. So I've just left it in there just as an open status of the 2.3 with the last addendum we did, counter offer, and just leaving it open because it is open that she said, yeah, they may, if this goes much longer, they got to get moved, and where you're willing to buy both houses together. So do I just leave that open in dot loop until there's, okay, I didn't know if I had to keep putting an update to you guys of notes of, hey, but that's where it is. Our offer's in at 2.3, not gonna budge. Right now they're at 2.7, but the realtor said if much more time goes on, they'll probably take it because they're not getting any activity right now.
Wow,
Yeah.
good, good.
So as something actually comes to closure, either through closing or they decide they're not buying here or
Or if
heaven
the property
forbid
sells.
they, yeah, or whatever, then close those loops. You can, and let us know, we'll archive them, so they're still there. But if it's an active loop, you know, just keep dumping documents in there. You don't have to submit them until it's something that we need to act on. But the paperwork needs to be there.
Yeah.
Good or bad.
Okay, awesome. All
Is that-
that everything?
That's it for
Okay,
me.
very, very good. Okay, so in closing, we just kind of want to review. So going up through now through the end of spring and then through summer, we're thinking, like I say, we'll have an actual meeting or training every other week. And then we'll just basically have a huddle where we can sit down. Maybe we'll come with just an issue or a problem that one of our agents have that we can talk about it. But a good chance to kind of cooperate with each other and pick each other's brain, just chat. There's no real formal procedure or plan, we'll just have a discussion. And we'll have them on, Zoom, so that if you were not able to watch, but you could like to be involved, first could be, if you're not able to be here, but you would like to watch, then you're welcome to do that. Okay, anything from anyone back on Zoom? Looks like we've got a few people still in there.
Are you gonna set specific weeks that are huddles and weeks that are sales, or are you gonna wing it?
Well, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and post that before the meeting of, what, confirming exactly what it will be. But we'll probably go like every other week, one or the other, and then we'll post those on Messenger so you know what's coming up.
Okay,
Awesome, good question, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone,
appreciate it.
thanks so much.
Good information.
thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.